A real estate billionaire walked into his own boardroom, pointed at the woman fixing the radiator in the corner, and told his mother she was his fiancée. Before we get into how that went, tell us in the comments, what city in Canada are you watching from? And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Adrian Whitmore had built his empire the hard way, not in the way rich men usually claim, not from a garage or a dorm room with 3 friends and a dream. He had actually started with nothing, or close enough to nothing that the difference didn't matter. His father had left the family when Adrian was 11, owing money to half of Calgary and pride to no one. His mother, Constance, had clawed back from that shame with sheer willpower and a second mortgage. Adrian had watched her do it, absorbed every lesson, and decided at 16 that he would never, ever be at anyone's mercy again. By 38, he had kept that promise. Whitmore Properties controlled a significant chunk of commercial real estate across Alberta and British Columbia. He wore expensive suits and drove a car that cost more than most people's houses, and he had cultivated a reputation for being brilliant, decisive, and almost completely impossible to warm up to. The only person who could still make him feel like he was 11 years old standing in an empty kitchen was Constance Whitmore. She arrived at his Calgary office on a Thursday morning without calling ahead, which was itself a power move he recognized because he'd inherited it from her. "We need to talk about Isabelle Fontaine," Constance said, sitting down across from his desk with the posture of someone who had already decided how the conversation would end. Adrian did not look up from the contract in his hand. "Good morning, Mother. The Fontaine family has been waiting 2 months for an answer. Her father called me personally, Adrian. Do you understand how embarrassing that is?" "What I understand," he said, setting the contract down, "is that you agreed to an engagement on my behalf without consulting me, and you seem to find that less embarrassing. I did what was necessary. The Fontaines control the Northern Corridor permits we've been fighting over for 3 years. One marriage and that entire dispute disappears. It's not romantic, it's arithmetic. I'm already with someone." Constance stopped. Her expression shifted in the way it did when she heard something she had decided in advance was not true. "No, you're not. I am. It's serious, and I'm not marrying Isabelle Fontaine." His mother's eyes narrowed. "Who is she?" Adrian looked away. It was an involuntary glance, a half-second of searching for something he could use, and that was when he saw her. The woman crouched beside the old cast-iron radiator along the north wall of his boardroom, visible through the glass partition, was doing something with a wrench that appeared to require considerable focus. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, wore a gray work shirt with a small company logo on the sleeve, and had a smear of rust-colored grease on her left cheekbone. She had not looked up once since arriving. "Her," Adrian said. Constance turned. "That's her," he repeated, and stood up, because there was apparently no version of this that wouldn't be completely insane, and he had committed to the insane one. He walked into the boardroom before his better judgment could catch up. The woman, he did not know her name, glanced up at the sound of the door. She had sharp, dark eyes and the expression of someone who had heard every version of an interruption and found none of them worth stopping work for. "Hi," Adrian said, which was not his most articulate opening. "Give me 40 minutes, she said, returning her attention to the radiator. "The valve seat's worn. I can fix it today, or you can have it flood your floor by next week. Your call. I need a favor." She looked up again. This time she actually looked at him. The suit, the office, the general aura of a man accustomed to people doing what he asked. Her expression did not change in the way he was used to expressions changing. "I'm working," she said. "My mother is standing in my office and I just told her you were my girlfriend." Silence. "I realize," he said. "That's a strange thing to say to someone whose name I don't know." "It's Meredith," she said. "Meredith Okafor." She set the wrench down very deliberately on the drop cloth. "And no, I haven't asked anything yet. You were about to ask me to pretend to be your girlfriend to get out of whatever situation you just created in there. The answer is no." Constance appeared in the boardroom doorway. Meredith stood up, wiped her hands on a rag she pulled from her back pocket, and turned to face the older woman with a calm that Adrian found genuinely startling. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said with a polite nod. "And you are?" Constance asked. "The person who is going to stop your son's radiator from destroying his hardwood floor." She looked at Adrian. "I'll finish up and send the invoice through the office." She picked up her wrench. "You didn't even say anything." Adrian said, after his mother had left with a look that promised a very long conversation later. I said what needed saying. Meredith crouched back down beside the radiator. Goodbye, Mr. Whitmore. He stood in the doorway for a moment. I'd pay you, he said. I already have a job, a better paying one, not interested. He left. But he stood outside the glass for another 2 minutes watching her work, which he did not fully understand and chose not to examine. He found her company name on the work order and called the main line the next morning. They confirmed that Meredith Okafor was their senior technician for commercial HVAC and plumbing, had been with them for 6 years, and was not, as far as they knew, anyone's girlfriend. He left his number. She did not call. He went back to the building the following Tuesday under the pretext of checking the radiator repair, which was genuinely flawless. The kind of work that came from someone who understood the system and not just the obvious problem. The office manager told him Meredith had left a detailed maintenance report and a note suggesting he replace 2 additional valves before winter. He tracked her down at her next job site, a heritage building in Inglewood that was being converted to mixed use. She was on the 2nd floor running new pipe, and she heard him coming up the stairs because the building was quiet and he was wearing dress shoes on hardwood. You have my number, she said without turning around. You didn't use it. That was intentional. Adrian leaned against the doorframe. I want to explain the situation properly. You don't have to. My mother has arranged an engagement I never agreed to. The Fontaine family controls permits my company needs. If I don't produce a credible reason to end the engagement, she will find a way to make it official before I can stop her. I need someone to play the role of my partner for approximately 3 weeks. I'm willing to pay well. Meredith finished tightening a joint, checked it, and straightened up. She was taller than he'd registered at first. She looked at him with the same steady expression he remembered. Why me? You didn't flinch. That's not a compliment. It is, actually. He paused. Most people, when I walk into a room, adjust. You didn't. That's useful. She considered this. I'm not an actress. You don't need to be. You just need to be yourself in a few social situations. Social situations, she repeated. With your family, and some professional events, and Isabelle Fontaine, probably. Meredith was quiet for a moment. She picked up her clipboard and checked something on it. My brother Kwame is on a waiting list for a specialized cardiac program in Vancouver. The out-of-pocket costs aren't covered by provincial insurance. If I do this, you cover his medical costs in full, with documentation and a real financial transfer before I attend a single event. Not after. Before. Adrian was quiet. That's my condition, Meredith said. Take it or leave it. Done, he said. She handed him her clipboard and a pen. Write your email address there. I'll send you a contract draft tonight. If your lawyers want changes, fine. But no touching, no personal questions I don't want to answer. And if you're disrespectful, the deal ends on the spot. No refunds. He wrote his email address. His handwriting was, she noted privately, very neat. The first event was a dinner at his mother's house in Mount Royal, which was the kind of neighborhood where the houses had names. Meredith arrived in dark trousers and a well-cut blazer she'd borrowed from her friend Tanya, who was a foot shorter than her but had excellent taste. Her hair was down. She had small gold earrings that had belonged to her mother. She looked, she thought, like exactly who she was. Someone trying. Adrian was waiting at the front door. He had changed out of his usual suit into something slightly less formal, which she suspected was a deliberate choice. He looked at her when she walked up the path. You look, he started. Don't, she said pleasantly. He closed his mouth. Then, fine. The guest list is my mother, my Aunt Lorraine and Isabelle Fontaine and her parents, the Fontaines, Charles and Vivienne. They're polite, but they're watching for weakness. Got it. My mother's going to ask you questions. I can handle questions. She's very good at it. Meredith looked at him. Adrian, I fix problems for a living. I walk into situations other people gave up on. I'll be fine. He held the door open. Constance Whitmore received them in a sitting room that had probably been photographed for a magazine. She kissed her son's cheek with the warmth of someone ticking a box. She looked at Meredith. Meredith, Constance said. Adrian mentioned you work in mechanical systems, Meredith said. Commercial and heritage buildings, mostly. I specialize in older systems that have been mismanaged over time. She smiled. There's a lot of them. Constance's eyebrows moved slightly. How practical. It pays well, Meredith said. And it's honest work. I like that. Isabel Fontaine was across the room in a dress that cost more than Meredith's truck. She was beautiful in a very composed way, the kind of beautiful that required maintenance, and she looked at Meredith with a smile that was technically friendly. "It's so lovely to meet you," Isabel said. "Adrian's never really introduced anyone before." We were all starting to wonder. "Wonder what?" Meredith asked. Isabel's smile adjusted slightly. "Whether he'd ever slow down enough to let someone in." "He hasn't slowed down," Meredith said. "I just keep up." Charles Fontaine, who had the build of a man who had played rugby in university and still wanted you to know it, laughed from across the room. "I like her," he said to no one in particular. At dinner, Constance went to work with the subtlety of someone who had once, Meredith suspected, made a junior executive cry at a charity auction. "And your family, Meredith? Are they in Calgary? My mother passed away when I was 19. My brother Kwame is in Vancouver. He's doing well." "I'm sorry about your mother," Vivienne Fontaine said, and she sounded like she actually meant it. "Thank you." Meredith glanced at her water glass. She was a very practical woman. She used to say that hard things teach you what you're made of, and you might as well find out. "And what are you made of?" Constance asked. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't quite unkind either. "Mostly stubbornness," Meredith said. "A bit of copper pipe knowledge, the usual." Charles Fontaine laughed again. Adrian, seated beside her, was very still in the way a person goes still when they are carefully not reacting to something. Later, at the Coates, Isabel found her alone. "You're not what I expected," she said. "I'm not sure what you expected. Someone easier to dismiss." Isabel's voice was light. "Adrian usually gravitates toward people who don't push back." Meredith looked at her. "I wouldn't know. I haven't been around that long." "No," Isabel said. "You haven't." She collected her coat from the closet. "But for what it's worth, I never wanted this either, the engagement. My father made assumptions and my mother didn't correct them. I have a life I'm trying to build that has nothing to do with Northern Corridor permits." She paused. "So, good luck," Meredith blinked. "You too." In the car going back, Adrian was quiet for a full 5 minutes. "That went better than expected," he said. "Isabel doesn't want to marry you either." He looked over. "What?" She told me. "She has her own life." Meredith looked out at the city going past. "You two could have just talked to each other." Adrian was quiet again. Then, "My mother doesn't give a lot of room for just talking," I noticed. 10 days after the dinner, Adrian called her for a second event, the Whitmore Properties annual gala at the Fairmont. Meredith wore a dress she found at a consignment shop on 17th Avenue, dark green, simple, fitted. It was a genuine find, and she knew it. She arrived at the hotel and Adrian was waiting in the lobby, and he looked at her, and something happened in his face that he very quickly controlled. "The green is good," he said, which was the most careful compliment she had ever received. "You look tolerable," she said. He almost smiled. The gala was everything she'd expected and more. The room was full of people who knew the price of everything and the value of very little. She collected a glass of sparkling water and stood beside Adrian while he did what he was clearly built for. Moving through a crowd with purpose, shaking hands, remembering names, never fully relaxing. She watched him work and thought, he's good at this. Not fake good, actually good. He listened when people talked. He asked follow-up questions that showed he'd remembered previous conversations. He wasn't performing charm, he was exercising a skill. "You're watching me," he said without turning his head. "I'm observing," she said. "You're better with people than you let on. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation for being cold, for being focused. Cold is the interpretation people use when they can't get what they want from you." A man approached them before she could respond, heavy-set, pink-cheeked, holding a glass of something amber. He looked at Meredith the way some men look at things they feel entitled to evaluate. "Whitmore," he said. "This must be the woman I've been hearing about." "Jeffrey," Adrian said, his voice flattening slightly. "Interesting choice," Jeffrey said, looking at Meredith with a smile that was technically a smile. "What is it you do again?" "Plumbing, mechanical systems," Meredith said. "Among other things." "Ha!" He looked at Adrian. "She's a long way from the usual crowd." The words landed in the room the way they were meant to, softly enough to deny but sharply enough to sting. Adrian turned to face Jeffrey fully. His voice, when he spoke, was very quiet. "You're going to apologize to Meredith right now." "Adrian, I was only—" "Right now, Jeffrey." Jeffrey's smile slipped. The people nearby had noticed. "It was only a joke," Jeffrey said to Meredith. "No offense meant," Untaken, Meredith said, in a tone that meant the opposite. When Jeffrey moved away, Meredith kept her face very still. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. Adrian looked at her. You weren't going to say anything. I was going to let it go. There's a difference. You shouldn't have to let things go. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the room. Why does it matter to you? She asked. He was quiet. I don't like people being dismissed because of where they come from. She looked at him sideways. Is that what happened to your family? After your father left? He glanced at her. How did you know about that? You mentioned it once, the first time. You said you'd built things from scratch. She paused. That phrase has a specific sound when someone's had to. Something shifted in him. She could see it, a small recalibration. People were not kind, he said after a while. Calgary's social circles are small. My mother rebuilt everything with her own 2 hands, and people still found ways to remind her of what had happened. And you absorbed that. I absorbed that you do not let people make you small. That's a good lesson, Meredith said. My mother taught me the same thing, just with different language. They stood together looking out at the city lights through the tall windows, and the conversation moved in a direction neither of them had intended, but neither moved to stop it. The next morning she was back on a job site, an office tower downtown, fan coil units on the 14th floor, and she found herself thinking about the way he had stepped in front of Jeffrey without hesitating. She had not expected that. She had expected to manage events, deflect questions, and collect her payment. She had not expected to find someone she actually wanted to understand. Tanya called at lunch. So how's the rich fake boyfriend situation? Complicated, Meredith said. Complicated how? Feelings complicated or logistics complicated? Meredith ate a bite of her sandwich. He stood up for me at a gala last night. A man was being dismissive and Adrian shut it down. Oh no, Tanya said. I know, you like him. I didn't say that. Meredith, I said it's complicated. Tanya was quiet for a moment. He's from a completely different world. I know. You'd have to deal with his mother. I know. And gala events forever. I know, Tanya. Okay, Tanya said. Just checking that you know. The trap was set on a Wednesday. Isabel Fontaine, who had in fact been quietly working against the arrangement herself, had apparently underestimated how far her father Charles was willing to go to preserve the deal. Charles Fontaine had hired a private investigator, not to dig up dirt, but to manufacture it. The PI had called Meredith's company and arranged a service call at a property Charles owned, giving a false name. When Meredith arrived, the property manager, a man in his 40s named Derek, who seemed confused about the whole situation, let her into an apartment that had clearly been staged to look like a personal space rather than a commercial unit. She fixed the issue she'd been called about, a faulty expansion valve, and left in 40 minutes. She had no idea that a photographer had taken pictures from the hallway. Meredith entering the apartment, Meredith speaking with Derek, one taken at an angle through a window that looked, to someone who wanted it to look that way, like something else entirely. Adrian found the envelope on his desk Thursday morning. He looked at the photographs for a long time. The first thing he felt was cold. The second thing was anger. The third thing, which he did not examine right away, was pain. The specific pain of someone who has started to trust again and finds themselves suddenly unsure if they should have. He called her. Where were you yesterday afternoon? Meredith heard something in his voice. Service call in Beltline. Why? Which property? She gave him the address. There was a pause. A man named Derek, he said, the property manager. He was there when I arrived. I was there 40 minutes. Adrian, what is this? Someone sent me photographs. Silence. Photos of me entering an apartment, Meredith said slowly, with a man in casual clothes who was the property manager of a building I was called to fix a valve in. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it had gone very still. Adrian, the photographs show me doing my job. The stillness in her voice was becoming something else. You've known me for 3 weeks. I've done nothing but what I said I would do. And your first instinct when someone sends you pictures is to call me like I'm on trial. I'm not. You didn't ask me first. You called me already convinced. She paused. That's the part that matters, not the photos. The fact that you didn't ask. The line was quiet. I'm going to need some time, she said. And she hung up. He didn't sleep. He spent 3 hours that night going through every detail, the property address, the name on the service request, the company that had placed the call. By 1 a.m., He had connected it to a property management company that was a subsidiary of a holding company that was 40% owned by Fontaine Capital. Charles Fontaine had set it up. He drove to the Fontaine house at 8 in the morning and rang the doorbell until Charles Fontaine answered in a dressing gown. 40 minutes later, Adrian had a full account: the photographer, the staged property, the false service request. Charles, to his credit, looked more embarrassed than defiant by the end of it. Back in his car, Adrian sat for a long time. He had doubted her. He had called her and let her hear the doubt in his voice before he had done a single moment of investigation. And she had been exactly right. It wasn't the photos. It was that he hadn't asked. He called. She let it ring through. He called again. On the third call, she picked up. It was staged, he said. Charles Fontaine arranged the whole thing. The property, the photographer, all of it. You were there to fix a valve on a building he owns under a subsidiary company. You didn't do anything wrong. A pause. I know I didn't, she said. I know you knew. I'm the one who needed to catch up. He pressed his hand against his forehead. I'm sorry, Meredith. I should have asked you first. I should have started there, and I didn't, and I'm sorry. The line was quiet for a long time. I've spent my whole adult life, she said finally, working in spaces where people make fast assumptions about who I am, what I'm capable of, whether I can be trusted with something expensive or important or complicated, and I have never once given anyone a reason to doubt me. Not once, I know, and the first time someone I was starting to. She stopped. It doesn't matter. It does. Another silence. I need a few days, she said. Okay. I'm not quitting the arrangement. Quam's appointment is next week. But I need a few days to take whatever you need. She hung up. He sat in his car outside the Fontaine house and stared at his steering wheel and understood, with the specific clarity that only comes from having just made a significant mistake, that he had not been afraid of the photographs. He had been afraid of caring about her, and he had managed both things wrong. On a Saturday afternoon, without calling ahead, he went to her. He had her address from the contract. He drove to a neighborhood in Forest Lawn, small houses, tidy yards, a corner store with a hand-painted sign. Her house had a red door. He knocked. She opened it in jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair loose, a pair of safety glasses pushed up on her head because she had apparently been doing something in the back. She looked at him for a moment. You should have called, she said. You wouldn't have answered. She stepped back and let him in anyway. The house was small and warm and organized in the way that spaces become organized when the person who lives there actually thinks about how to use them. There were framed photographs on one wall. A woman who must have been her mother, a younger Kwame, a picture of a lake somewhere. There was a bookshelf that had both textbooks and fiction. On the kitchen table was a disassembled pressure gauge she had apparently been cleaning. Tea? She said. Please. She put the kettle on and he sat at the table and looked at the pressure gauge parts and did not say anything about them. How did you figure it out? She asked. He told her. The property records, the subsidiary, the photographer's invoice he had found after 4 hours of digging. She listened, hands wrapped around her mug, and when he finished she was quiet. You spent 4 hours on that, she said. More like 6. Because you felt guilty, because you were right, he said. And I don't like being wrong, but more than that, I don't like having hurt someone who didn't deserve it. She looked at him. My mother died when I was 19, Meredith said. And Kwame was 16 and not doing well in school, and we had a 2-bedroom apartment and a lot of bills. I took on every job I could. I learned what I learned because it was reliable and it paid well and I was good at it. I didn't have a lot of room for this, she gestured vaguely. Whatever this is, this, Adrian said, has not gone the way I expected either. What did you expect? Someone who would find the arrangement convenient and keep her distance. He looked at her. Someone who wouldn't make me think, and I make you think. You make me question things I thought were settled. That's different from convenient. Meredith was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car went by, and somewhere down the street someone was mowing a lawn. I'm not from your world, she said. I'm not sure my world is something to aspire to. Your mother will come around or won't. Either way, I'm not letting her make this decision for me. She looked at him for a long time. There was something careful in her expression, something that was measuring the distance between what she wanted to say and what was safe to say. The 3 weeks are almost up, she said. I know. After Quam's appointment, the arrangement technically ends. I know. And then, what? Adrian set his mug down. That depends on you. If you tell me to go, I'll go. But if you're asking what I want to know you passed the contract. I want to see you at your actual job and hear you explain why a 60-year-old heating system is interesting. I want to eat dinner at your kitchen table and have you tell me I'm being an idiot when I'm being an idiot." He paused, which is apparently more often than I'd realized. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile, but close. "You're extremely strange for a billionaire," she said. "I've been told. Most people like you want someone who fits, who looks right in the room." "I spent 20 years building rooms," he said. "I don't actually like the rooms that much." She picked up her mug again. Outside the window, the afternoon light was going gold. "I have a work dinner Wednesday," she said. "Industry thing. Not glamorous. Most of my colleagues wear steel-toed boots. I'll wear different shoes," he said. "That's not." She laughed. It was a short sound, surprised out of her. "That's not what I was offering." "I know, but I'll still wear different shoes." The confrontation happened the following Monday. Constance arrived at Adrian's office with Isabel's father and a lawyer, and what was essentially a drafted engagement announcement ready for signature. She laid it on his desk with the expression of someone who had run out of patience and was done being indirect about it. "The Fontaine family has been patient enough," she said. "This nonsense with the tradesperson, her name is Meredith, has gone on long enough. Charles is willing to move past the incident if we proceed with." "Charles staged that incident," Adrian said. Silence. "He hired a photographer," Adrian said. "He arranged a false service call to his own property to make it look like Meredith was meeting someone inappropriately. He did this to discredit her so I would end things." He looked at Charles Fontaine. "Would you like to correct that account, or should I continue?" Charles had the good sense to look uncomfortable. It was yes or no. The situation had become yes or no, Charles. Yes. Constance looked at her son, then at Charles, then at the floor. "I will not be signing anything today," Adrian said, "and I would like everyone except my mother to leave my office." When the room had cleared, Constance sat down. She looked, for the first time Adrian could remember, actually tired. "She doesn't fit," Constance said, but it was quieter now. Less a weapon and more a concern. "She fits me," he said, "which is what you should have been asking about from the beginning. Adrian, our family spent years rebuilding. This company, this name, it took everything. I know, I was there." He sat across from her, "and I built most of it, which means I get to choose who I build the rest of it with." Constance was quiet for a long moment. "The permits," she said finally. "The Fontaine corridor. I'll find another way. Or I'll wait them out. I've been in worse positions." She looked at him. "She makes you different. Better, I think. You sound like your father." "He left. I'm staying. There's a difference." Constance pressed her lips together. Then she picked up her bag. "Bring her to dinner," she said on her way out. "Properly. Not as a performance. I will." She paused at the door. "She should wear something warm. The dining room is drafty and I've been meaning to fix the radiator for months." Adrian blinked. "Tell her what the problem is," Constance said dryly. "I suspect she'll have an opinion." Quame's appointment went well. The specialist in Vancouver was optimistic. Meredith sat in the waiting room and cried, quietly, and Adrian sat beside her and didn't say anything because she had told him, once, that she didn't need commentary when she was processing things. After, they walked along the seawall. It was a cool October afternoon, the kind Vancouver does well, with the mountains doing their impossible thing on the horizon. "Thank you," she said, "for making this possible." "You made it possible," he said. "You had the condition. You said yes. It was the right thing to do." She looked at the mountains. "You know the frustrating part about you? Only one part? You're a lot better than you look from the outside." "I look," he said, "like a man in an expensive coat. You look like someone who's decided not to let people in." She glanced at him. "And then you let me in anyway, even when it was inconvenient." "You were extremely inconvenient," he said. "You made me reevaluate several things I was very comfortable being wrong about." She smiled at that. A real one, full and unguarded, the kind he had learned to wait for because it was worth waiting for. "I have a radiator to look at," she said. "At your mother's house." "I know." She mentioned it. "That's practically an olive branch, from what I can tell. From her, it's basically a declaration of peace." Meredith considered this. "I can work with that." They walked on along the seawall, and the mountains stayed where they were, doing their impossible thing, and neither of them said the obvious thing because they didn't need to. It had already been decided somewhere back in a boardroom in Calgary, on an afternoon when a woman with a wrench had looked at a man in an expensive suit and simply refused to adjust. 6 months later, Adrian Whitmore's annual gala had a different energy to it than anyone could quite explain. The room was the same hotel, same flowers, same skyline through the windows. But there was a woman in a deep burgundy dress moving through the crowd who knew most of the building staff by name, who had opinions about the ventilation in the East Wing, and who, when Jeffrey approached with his usual manner, looked at him with an expression so calm and so entirely unimpressed that he excused himself before he'd finished his sentence. Beside her, Adrian watched this happen and felt something he had not felt in a very long time, something light. Constance, across the room, had found herself in conversation with Kwame, who had come from Vancouver for the event, looking healthier and sharper than he had in years, and was apparently receiving a very thorough explanation of how mechanical systems work, which she was listening to with an expression that was not quite a frown. "Is your mother enjoying herself?" Meredith asked, appearing at his elbow. "She's learning about pressure differentials." "Good. It'll help her understand the dining room radiator. She's already asked you about it twice." "I know. I think she likes having a reason to call." Adrian looked at her. The light in the room was doing something generous to the burgundy of her dress and the gold of her earrings, the small ones, the ones that had been her mother's. And he thought, not for the first time, that he had no idea what he would have done if she had not been fixing a radiator that particular Thursday morning. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him sideways. "For what? For not adjusting?" She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for noticing." Around them the room moved and talked and did all the things rooms full of people do, and they stood in the middle of it and were, for the first time in a long time for both of them, exactly where they meant to be.